And then I told Pete, we should use some of these dangerous cities as training grounds for our military, National Guard, but military.
Breaking news, President Trump just made a major announcement. He wants more than just the National Guard deployed to some of the country's biggest cities like Chicago and Portland.
So he is calling for active military there to, quote, use some of these dangerous cities as training grounds, as you just heard, and he later described what he sees in Portland.
Portland, Oregon, where it looks like a war zone. And I get a call from the liberal governor, sir, please don't come in. We don't need you. I said, well, unless they're playing false tapes, this looked like World War II anymore, but you look at it.
Now, he later claimed that he sent federal troops to Seattle to stop protests during his first term.
And so you look at some of the things where they took over parts of Seattle. They actually took over a big percentage of Seattle. Think of that. You remember that. That was a while ago. And I sent in the troops and they were gone.
Time magazine reports federal officers were deployed to Seattle in 2020, but were quickly withdrawn. Some of our reporters on the ground said they never saw federal troops, only local police.
And the president wrapped up that speech to military leaders in Virginia, and it comes a day after our own state and city leaders sent a stern message to the White House. They told the president to, quote, stay out of Seattle. And Sean Chitnis in Seattle at City Hall with more on the state's message to the White House. We're also hearing from Portland's police chief this morning.
This is one city block. City of Portland is about 145 square miles. This is one city block. And even the events that are happening down there do not rise to the level of attention that they are receiving.
And new this morning, Portland's police chief says his officers have protests under control. This as President Trump threatens to send federal troops to what he calls a war-ravaged city. And last night, our affiliate in Portland witnessed officers arrest 2 people for allegedly beating someone on the ground with a stick at the protest. Chief Day says while these kinds of clashes were a major issue throughout the evening, it wasn't aimed at the ICE facilities.
We know that down at the facility there are a lot of competing points of view and a lot of differences of opinion. And last night we saw that played out more in the crowd and less directed towards the issues at the facility.
Stresses his officers have control of the city streets around the ICE facility, saying what's actually happening on the ground in Portland does not reflect the national narrative in his view.
And let's check back in now with Sean Chitnis live at Seattle City Hall with more on our state's message to the White House. Sean?
Hey, Bill, good morning. Well, that recent reaction and those new developments only adding to what we heard from the mayor of Seattle and Washington's attorney general yesterday, when at that point we still definitely didn't have any idea of troops coming to our area. That's still the case, but this was a precautionary step to try and make clear what steps they could take to try and fight that attempt to use the National Guard here in Washington in that way. So here's a little bit more about what Seattle Mayor Bruce Harrell said. He plans to release an executive order with actions the city can take if the Washington National Guard is mobilized. Attorney General Nick Brown said that the state is ready to challenge the Trump administration in court on that same matter, but it's still unclear who would have the final call on directing the National Guard, the governor or the president.
Seattle is certainly not war-ravaged, neither is Portland. We do not see anything happening here that would lead or generate an insurrection.
We do not need the federal government bringing in armored vehicles, semi-automatic weapons, military personnel to make, quote-unquote, us safer.
And so you just heard the Portland police chief talking about demonstrations that happened over there. Hundreds of people protesting the decision to send troops into that city outside of an ICE facility over there. Now, the U.S. Attorney General Pam Bondi, she reacted to that demonstration by saying that they were not peaceful, but radical extremists, and that anyone who threatened or assaulted an officer would be charged federally. But again, Portland police saying that that protest was peaceful and that they only made 2 arrests. President Trump announced over the weekend he was sending troops to Portland, which he called a war-ravaged city, and that they could use full force because ICE facilities are under siege by Antifa and domestic tariffs. And so this morning, we're still waiting to hear back from the Washington State Republican Party to get their reaction to what the Seattle mayor and Washington's attorney general said on this matter. Live in Seattle, Sean Chitness, Fox 13 News.
A second detainee shot during an attack on a Dallas ICE facility has died. Miguel Angel Garcia Hernandez was one of 3 people who were shot while being transferred to the ICE facility last Wednesday. He'd been on life support since the shooting. He leaves behind a pregnant wife and 4 young children. 1 detainee died at the scene. A 3rd is still recovering. The FBI investigating the shooting as a targeted act of violence.